Erica Ayala here, the Riveters team reporter alongside head coach Ivo Mocek. Ivo, how are we doing today?
I'm doing well, excited about this and great to see you again.
Likewise, I was telling you offline, I like the backdrop. We're both on brand today with our Rivs gear.
Yeah, you know what? This is I believe this is the jersey from our last year, right, from the bubble season, and this might be one of my favorite, Riveters jerseys actually. So it's a choice.
I like it. I like it a lot. And I know we talked before the season started about the Riveters really wanting to, let's say, get off on the right foot, and certainly had something to prove coming out of that season. You didn't play this last weekend, but you're in the top four as far as what the Riveters have been able to do. And Rebecca Russo is the player of the month for November. That makes her the first ever Premier Hockey Federation PHF player of the month. Let's start there, Coach. How do you like how the squad is coming together, and what makes Russo so special?
If I start with her, I mean, it's just her energy in general. She's a ball of energy. As soon as she steps on the ice, and she's extremely competitive, right? She's such a competitor. Like, no matter what kind of a drill we do during practice, if it's a small area game, it's a race, she always wants to win, and that kind of makes a difference with her, And I also feel that last year she didn't get to play much, obviously because of COVID. The year before she skipped entirely, so she misses hockey, she's hungry, for goals, she's hungry for games, and that kind of drives her. And she's been showing, and with the group coming together, kind of the same, and other teams are going through the same thing, I would say. It's early in the season still, not too many games last year or last season, right? It was a tough season. So still things are kind of settling in, and with every week it's getting better. So we're hoping, to continue and keep showing that progress, this coming weekend too.
Yeah, for sure. You said everything that people need to know about Russo's game. It's absolute energy. And as I mentioned, the Riveters did not play last week, but you sit in fourth place right now in the standings. I want to talk about the mental preparation that goes into hockey, because the next time the Riveters hit the ice, it will be a mental health awareness game. We talked to the captain, Madison Packer, about that, and we have a great interview with her coming up. But there's mental health and wellness, and there's also mental preparation that I would imagine as a coach, you have to make sure that you are infusing both to get optimal performance from your players. So when you hear the term sports psychology, what does that mean to you, Coach? And how do you utilize sports psychology to, again, get the optimal performance from your team?
Well, first, let me start with, as a coach, especially I would say with college team or high level junior teams and then professional teams. Yes, you are a coach, you're focusing on all the aspects of a hockey game, but a big part of your job is to talk to your players. Like, that's what I was saying last time, like I want to communicate with my players or with our players as much as possible, right? And talking to them, that kind of opens the door for you to know what's going on through their heads, what kind of a state of mind, they're in. And not every player is the same, right? Every player needs a different kind of approach, right? It really is going to the depth, get to know the player, right? And then trying to solve the problems if they, share the problems and help them out. So I think it's extremely important that all your players are mentally prepared, not just for games, but for practices as well, right? It's and it starts kind of with college, right? When all the players, right, at college level, right, they don't only focus on hockey, right? They focus at classes, they focus at homeworks and tests, right? So they want to do the best at school. They want to do best, at practice or during games, right? In our league, since majority of the players, have jobs outside of hockey as well, it's the same thing, right? And I've been telling them, hey, we have, limited amount of practices during the week. I understand there is a lot of off-ice stuff happening in your lives, but once we do get here and we do hit the ice, I want all of us, to focus on the job we got to get done on the ice and be ready, not just physically, but also mentally.
Yeah, that's so important. And sometimes you hear coaches say things like, hey, if you've only got 70%, give me 100% of that 70%. But it sounds like what you also are doing is essentially doing like a vibe check or a pulse check by making sure that you're communicating and having that open line of communication. And absolutely, we talked about that in the first coach's corner, right? Being able to have not just that you can go up to a player and just kind of say, hey, are things okay? But also that players can come to you, and how laying that foundation and that preparation is a huge part, it sounds like, of being at the optimal mental capacity when it comes to, the assignment, which of course is to win hockey games.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what, it's you will see it, you will know it, right? Once you get to know the players, right? You will see at practice, there will be practices, right? You look at a player, who usually is, happy, full of energy and stuff, right? And suddenly, that player is just a little down, right? So it kind of, you don't want to be tiptoeing around that player, right? But let's have a conversation. That's what I'm always trying to do. Let's trying to have the conversation with the players, and for them trying to open up, and once they do, it just helps so much. Not just me to understand better them as human beings, but also as hockey players, right? But it also helps them, to kind of unpack, and feel it's a safe zone, basically.
Yeah, I love that. And so, we're talking a lot about, again, just that comfort level, that trust that you need to have when you're coaching a team, and that your team needs to have. And again, talk to Madison Packer. It sounds like as the group of captains that they also do things, game nights and things like that to just build that camaraderie. But there's also another part of it. And we talked about a few things that you do every practice on the last coach's corner, talking about, getting tips in front, and obviously special teams, but specifically the power play. But I would imagine that some of that also, because a part of sports psychology is visualization, right? And so sometimes you have to get athletes to do things and to perform at levels that maybe they haven't had to before, either because they're in a different position or the demand of the matchup requires more of them. So how do you kind of use sports psychology in that way, maybe to inspire and get athletes to aspire to hit another level?
It's funny you brought that up, because just yesterday, we had a meeting with a player who I feel is not playing to her full potential. And again, it's very individual, right? I could raise the voice way more, at a different player, but it's with some players, you got to be a little bit more diplomatic, let's say, right? So this was, yesterday it was kind of somewhere in the middle, right? And basically the message was, hey, we know you can be a better player. Here's what we see. Here's what we think you can do better, right? Here's what we think you should be working on, not just on the ice, but off the ice as well, right? And it was a very honest conversation, because once you're not honest, with the players, it's just it creates confusion. It makes them doubt your what you're saying, and your decisions, right? So being honest with the players is extremely important.
Yeah, absolutely. And so the Riveters, you still have a little bit of time before you hit the ice again. So you'll have time to get not just this individual player, but the whole team to work on specific things. And as I teased a little bit earlier, Coach Ivo, I know that you and a few other players, I mean, if you ask Kelly Babstock, she's ready for everyone. So, we'll just put that out there. But there are some players that really want to get a shot at Boston, especially because of how the Riveters season ended last year in the bubble, and really not getting an opportunity to take on that Boston Pride team. And they are the number one team, but have showed that, that they are a team that can be beat. We've seen Connecticut really take them to task, even Toronto. But then also on the flip side, we've also seen Boston shut things down pretty quickly. So when you think about that Boston team, when you think about the Riveters team, what are some of the things when it comes to the preparation on the ice, but then also the mental part of the game? How do you kind of prepare for a Boston team, knowing that emotions, knowing that everyone's going to be really like zoned into this game?
I actually feel that it's going to be a little helpful to us that we have not played Boston in a long time, because in my first season with the Riveters, we played Boston, I don't know, 6 times during the season, maybe even more, and we lost every single game, right? And not all the games were sort of blowout kind of games. There were some very, very tough, tight competitive games, right? But it was a way different team back then, right? They have a different team, but I would say us, our group has changed way more than theirs. So it's going to be benefiting us a little bit that we're kind of starting with a clean slate, going into the Boston series, and we're just got to be mentally tough, right? So and I believe that you can be mentally tough, and prepared, when you put the work in and you prepare, right? Then you can be confident, right, going into the games. So we saw that, like you said, we saw that anybody in this league is beatable. Anybody in this league has weaknesses, and holes in the roster or defense, whatever it is, right? And we saw that with Toronto this past weekend, right? They were 3-0 after that first 3 games, right? They go to Boston, lose both of the games. So it's this year will be extremely close, and anybody is here to beat. So I'm excited about that series, against Boston. It's I take it. I don't want to say I take it personally, but it means a lot, to go into that game knowing it's basically the only team we have not beaten since I started coaching this team.
Wow. Yeah. And there's some history behind that. The OG Riveters, back when they were the New York Riveters, not a great team, had some difficulty getting in the win column, but they had multiple wins against that Boston Pride team. So I know some OG Riv fans remember that. Also, the Riveters and Rebecca Russo was on that team when the Boston Pride were looking to go undefeated. They spoiled that. So I think it's going to be a good one, Coach. The rivalry renewed as the Riveters, the new school Riveters, look to take on Paul Mara and the Boston Pride. I think it's going to be a good one. But also, the reason that we focused on mental preparedness and mental health awareness is because, as I mentioned, Madison Packer, the captain, has really taken on the mantle as far as being a spokesperson for mental health awareness and also substance abuse. And on Saturday, December 18th, it will be the mental health awareness game. Madison Packer and all of the rest of the Riveters will be making sure to just talk about, like you said, being there for each other as a team, but also as a greater hockey community. So before we close out this Coach's Corner, now thinking a little bit outside of the Riveters, but maybe the impact that the Riveters can have on something like mental health awareness and mental health and wellness, what do you hope will be the overriding message off the ice by the Riveters having those specialty jerseys and having someone like Madison Packer and others talk openly about mental health?
Well, I would just say what you just said, just talking about mental health is extremely important, right? Because especially in hockey, I feel, even 10 years ago, which feels, not that long ago, right? Nobody was talking about mental health, right? 10, 20, 30 years ago, nobody was talking about mental health. You were expected to be some sort of a, machine basically, right? And just perform, and everybody was just caring about your physical health, right? Maybe sometimes not even that, but it's just it's such an important thing, to talk about it and feeling comfortable talking about it, right? And when it comes to hockey, I stay in our sport. It's just yes, sometimes a coach needs to be hard on the player, right? If the player cannot handle the fact, that coach is hard, that's on the player, right? And probably cannot play on a certain level. But at the same time, coaches, and I've seen that over the last couple of years, how stories kind of have been, unpacking. Coaches also got to know that it's a new era, it's a new generation of players, right? And like I said earlier, every player needs to be approached differently, right? So some players can, handle more, some player, maybe a little less. So it's always finding that individual approach. And I hope and I believe that that weekend game will help us spread that awareness about mental health, help people, talk about it more. And we've seen that before, that sometimes, on things on our social media, can go a long way. So I'm really hoping that game, will have a big impact on that, and just let people know that, there's that stigma with the hockey players, everybody needs to be tough. But at the end of the day, hockey players also are just, human beings, so yes, we can handle a little more, maybe have a higher pain tolerance physically, but it's such a competitive, sport, high intense sport, that it takes a big toll on your mental health as well. So I'm very happy, about this initiative. I'm very happy that we were going to be part of that, and we're going to be doing this. And again, like I said, it's extremely important to talk about it.
So fans, you can get your tickets to see the Riveters host the Boston Pride. As I mentioned, a handful of years ago, they ended the Boston Pride undefeated streak right on that sheet of ice at the Barnabas Health Hockey House in Newark, New Jersey. Madison Packer and the Riveters taking on the other number 14, Jillian Dempsey and the Boston Pride. Coach Ivo, you and Coach Kelly Nash will have your team prepped and ready for that game, I'm sure. But before we let you go, this is the last thing for real. But we know that some people are watching this, they're hockey players, but some are just hockey fans, and others may be wanting to get into coaching. So we'll leave with a piece of advice when it comes to thinking about the mental aspect of the game. What is maybe some advice that you got, or some advice that you carry with you when thinking about how to coach players, again, to that optimal performance, but thinking about how they think about the game?
Good question. I mean, it's if I started with youth hockey, I feel it's important, talking to your players, especially when it comes to that teenage age, when the kids are just going through so much, it's so important, to find that time, pop in the locker room before a practice and just ask around, hey, how was school today? Hey, how was thing? How are things at home? So it's just so important to understand your players, right? And then you can get more out of your players on the ice. So it's in that age, especially, and then obviously, getting older, it's so important, having a conversation with the players. And I've learned that. I started doing that, a few years ago when I started coaching 14U team, and there are just, it kind of makes you think back the way you were when you were at that age, and you were like, yeah, like there were so many things, that were happening in my life, high school, getting ready for prep school, whatever it was, right? Girlfriends, boyfriends, whatever it is, right? You're like, you got to think about it. So you gotta know your audience, if I put it that way, and just check in on your players every now and then, and just make sure that if there's something they want to talk about, not to be afraid to have that conversation with them.
I think that's great. Know your audience. You've said time and time again between our coaches' corners, just having those open lines of communication, and then utilizing that trust, that open communication, then to make the edits needed to get that performance on the ice. Well, Coach,
absolutely,
I think that sounds swell. You got me thinking, like, I gotta find a team to coach, now I got all the tips, from the sage over here.
Hey, that's what we're doing here, so I'm hoping that, that people will get inspired.
That's it. So, well, Coach Ivo, thank you so much for your time. This has been our second ever Coaches Corner. We're going to keep this going. We're going to have to get Kay Nashty on here too.
Absolutely. She's a fun one for sure too. So
Indeed, indeed. And, I'm sure we'll get to it down the line, but you're also coaching some coaches, and I'm sure that's pretty interesting as well.
That for sure is, yeah.
So we'll have to get into that on the next Coaches Corner, but best of luck. And we look forward to seeing what Russo, Packer, and the rest of the Rivs do against the Boston Pride Saturday, December 18th at the Barnabas Health Hockey House in Newark, New Jersey. Make sure you grab your tickets. You can check out the Riveters social media, get all the things there, and also see some really funny photos from Media Day. You had a pretty good one there, Ivo.
Yeah, there are a couple of fun ones. We really were having a good time with it.